Fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco here from Macabre Daily, and I'm joined today by director of photography Joel Froome, who's behind one of the films coming out on April 4th, The Yeti from Well Go USA. So, Joel, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me about the film.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and I know you've. This is not your first foray into cinematography and filmmaking, so I know you've got a very long history and career in the industry. But my first question for you is more related to genre. What, if any, personal relationship do you have to horror and the genre at large?
I've got quite a long relationship with horror these days. I think I'm at like overall 15, 16 features and documentary series and a couple of and a documentary feature in there as well. But I think the majority I would say have probably been horror. Um, and it's something that I love because it's always like you want to approach this one as from a completely different world, and you don't want to make every movie look the same as a cinematographer. So it's like it's each new challenge, and like when you read on the page, like a lot of horror films, like nighttime scene. This like how can we make this one different from the previous film we've done? So like I do love shooting horror films. I just think the horror genre at whole is like where it seems to be like people can have the most fun these days. It's just like the horror world, like people can do like blended horror, like horror comedies and horror sort of, and I just think it's just such a great world to be in, and people get sort of such a free reign to be creative, and I really enjoy, yeah, working on a variety of horror films. Like one of the ones I did, just sidetrack a little bit, was I had an opportunity a few years ago to go do the first ever Nepalese horror film. So I went and shot in
Oh,
the
wow.
Himalayas. So I was gone for just over a month shooting the Himalayas. And in the Nepalese film industry, they hadn't really, uh, they did a lot of stuff based on Bollywood and whatnot. And through a producer friend of mine, I met a director, and they wanted to tell like Nepalese centered stories based on, because they've got an amazing, culture and history, and they wanted to kind of base on their mythology. And so it's the first ever sort of Nepalese genre film ever made. So, and it was really incredible to be a part of that, to kind of tell these unique stories in the horror genre in all different parts of the world. Yeah, it's a lot of fun though. I love it.
What's the name of the film? I'd love to watch it.
It was called Kathapotali, which is also translated to the puppet.
Okay. I'm gonna jot
Yeah.
a note because I re this year I watched I don't know if it's the first horror film from Cyprus, but it's certainly one of the few. And
Mm,
you're right that there's that horror is such a universal experience, but every culture has its own way of recognizing folklore and mythology through horror.
mm,
And obviously there's universal themes around being human and being a person, but ultimately what helps those become unique is the added layer of how does this culture kind of understand or reconcile with things like death, the spirits, their own mythologies. I mean, I think Japanese, for example, like the whole yokai culture
exactly.
is massive in terms of like when it comes to inspiration for ideas. So it's awesome to hear one that you've kind of found a place within genre filmmaking, but also
Mm.
I would agree that it is a place where, well, right now it's the hot topic, right? It's the kind of the cool kid in class, if you will. So
Hmm.
there's a bit of validation, I think, that comes with that this isn't just a genre that's just for fun, but it also has some real kind of power behind it in terms of the folks working in it and the products being created through it.
Yeah, exactly. I just think, especially after the Oscars the other week, it's like it's
Right.
proven that horror is a marketable genre. It's a genre that's so varied, and you can just really sort of talented filmmakers can really kind of express themselves really well in the horror genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was celebrating when Coralie Farge's The Substance made it into the conversation around Academy Awards. It's like, this is
Hmm.
this is a good sign that I think the broader culture is appreciating horror more as an art form rather than just popcorn entertainment. And
Exactly.
but the thing is though, there is value in popcorn entertainment. And one of the things that I love
Hmm.
about the Yeti is that it harkens back to like these pulpy novels, almost this Indiana Jones-esque type of experience with monster movies, the things that I think
Mm.
really started the horror genre, at least here in the West. So,
Hmm.
when you were tasked to kind of create the look of the Yeti, what were some of the conversations you were having with the filmmakers about what this should look like, and how you can make it kind of put your own personal stamp on it?
Yeah, no, I think when I first kind of chatted with them about the look of the film, like I read the script a couple of times, and when I first sort of interviewed with them and gave them my idea, I think my initial pitch was uh, sort of like to look like The Thing, but shot by um, Robert Richardson, like Tarantino's cinematographer, with with way less money and definitely and less talent as well. Like I'm not going to kid myself and compare myself to Bob Richardson because he's a genius. But yeah, it was like we wanted that sort of. It was definitely a thing kind of feeling. We wanted a throwback film. Like we didn't want this to feel like a modern horror. And then in terms of the actual texture of it, like this kind of like grindhousey sort of free strip feel. Like you wanted the film grain to be to be able to really feel it and sort of just a bit grimier and not too clean. So it's like in terms of lighting, like that's why mentioned Robert Richardson, that like I wanted like some pools of light when we're in our interiors, but also sort of more stylized than I'd normally do in sort of naturalism in terms of lighting, like have it a bit sort of more of a throwback to how they lit a little more back in movies like The Thing and stuff like that. So it was kind of like really wanted to kind of an ode to these old films. Um, but then also we knew we wanted to shoot on anamorphic lenses, and part of that was by like we kind of really out of necessity because we shot the whole thing on a soundstage here
I
in
was going to ask you about
Buffalo.
that.
Yeah. So we shot it on a soundstage in Buffalo, and like it's not a very big stage. So and like our brilliant production designer Frank Coppola, like I think he's only able to build like 18 or 20 trees, you know. So we didn't have a massive forest or this massive set to deal with. So we knew we wanted to be pretty shallow. We knew we wanted to be pretty stylized. So it's kind of like the combination of kind of the colors of the old three strip kind of look with sort of some moody lighting, but and then anamorphic lenses just to kind of give it that thing vibe as well was kind of the initial sort of idea that we tried to give throughout the film.
I mean, it is. I think it's well, one. I think I was the reason I wanted to ask about how you filmed it and where you filmed is because it does such a good job of creating a sense of scale without ever kind of being endeared to location. So like we don't have to have like an establishing shot of a bunch of trees to know where
Mm,
we are. But also the
mm,
fact that it takes place in like the middle of a blizzard basically allows
mm.
for a lot of that obscurity or things to be obscured rather by the snow and the elements so that it kind of leans into like what the story's trying to tell.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
you mentioned kind of the kind of texture, and I think that that's you see that in parts of like the film stock scenes in particular where they're kind of black and white and they obviously have that
Mm.
look of aged film reel. Now, did you shoot digitally or did you shoot on film for this one?
It was definitely one of those, me and the Will and Gene, the two directors were in the meeting with the producers, like, we want to shoot these throwbacks on film, and they're like, no. And there was a chance. We just didn't have the budget, unfortunately. We had access, I've got an old Bolex camera, like a Super 16mm Bolex, and had film or even Super 8 or these newsreel type stuff, but it just wasn't feasible with our schedule. Like I think we shot in 18 days, maybe 19 days. Like it was a
Wow.
pretty very quick schedule, so we just didn't have the ability. So we knew we wanted to kind of push. So I knew that was I. I normally like to get as close in camera as possible, but that was when we knew we were going to have to push it further in post and in the grade to kind of really go pretty heavy on the film grain to sell that newsreel look. But then like I had a black and white LUT on my monitor, so I was kind of lighting those scenes for black and white because we didn't know they were going to be black and white. We weren't sure if we were going to do like a 4:3 frame and just have that as its own sort of 4:3, but that
That'd be
that
fun.
eventually, yeah, that was what the plan was when we shot it. But I think that got um they decided against that in the edit, but luckily we had framed for that, so everything's still relatively center punched and had the safe area to keep it full widescreen as we went. But yeah, so that was we definitely tried to push it as far in the newsreel um, footage as possible, and then adding the grain in post.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a it's a it's a delicate balance, right? Of like kind of how do you do it just enough, but without overdoing it, so people really pick it apart. I think that's why I asked this because like from my eye, the untrained eye, it's not apparent which format was used, and so I think that's part of
Mm,
the fun of filmmaking is like how much can we convince the audience of what they're seeing is kind of is made a certain way or is it's meant to elicit a certain feeling.
hmm
And when you mention about the sets and the lighting, I think it's what's so interesting is there's certain parts. I think about the actual beginning of the film when they're standing in that shack and there's like that one light that's kind of I forget the
mm,
character's name, but she's standing underneath that light, and it's just kind of it provides just enough light to put her in frame and give her like make her very visible. The rest is like slightly darkened. So how
mm.
how much negotiation with the lighting team could you like how much cooperation was there between you two in terms of how you frame the shot and also what you needed to get from them in terms of what they need to get from you in order to get the look you wanted to put forward.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great lighting G&E team on this, so I think I mean it was really fluid in terms of how we wanted to kind of cover it. We knew especially in the opening scene, we wanted this to be a relative one, like to kind of float through and introduce characters and stuff like that. But then we knew we had like a pool of moonlight, which again is leans in itself sort of away from where I had been in a lot of other films I had done, and have a bit more stylized and intense moonlight. So, um, yeah, I talk to my lighting team sort of more in broad strokes and just overall look and feel. Like I don't, I might speak about stops and I use a light meter and stuff like that, but we'll work with the gaffer if he thinks there's a fixture that's going to work best for us. Like I'll leave that to them, and then it's with the grips to how to rig it over into the hole. Because, like I said, it wasn't a massive studio, so it's like we could rig it to a beam above, but it's like was it perfectly located above the set? It was kind of hard. So luckily, we did get from production like an articulating arm, sort of frame that we're able to kind of put it old light on and create that moonlight pool in the right position. But like our overall lighting package on this was surprisingly small for a film entirely lit. Like I believe when I first had chatted with Mark, the gaffer, we were started going through the list, and he was like, "I just did a short film that had a bigger package than this." You know, so it was surprisingly small. So we had to be pretty very clever with what lights we used and how we exposed and whatnot.
I mean, I think it works all again in service of creating the mystery because so much of what makes, I think, propels the action in the Yeti is not just these they're not even random, but they're just kind of these surprising moments of ultra violence, but also this necessity to almost like obscure the Yeti for the like. There's this delayed gratification to actually seeing the Yeti, which we really don't get until the very, very end. So, what was it like for
Yeah,
you as far as composing shots that allowed us to get just enough, but also didn't give away too much too soon?
yeah. I mean, it was a fun challenge, and I think it's like because we would have shots, and then like we had because it was part of the plan to kind of have the amount of haze gradually get thicker and thicker throughout the film as we get closer to the Yeti and as part of a story piece. So we have like worked in a lot of haze, and then we'd have a shot and it'd all be good, but then the haze would kind of dissipate and I'd light to how it was. But as the haze dissipates a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, no, we can see the Yeti way too much. Like let's like we've either got to kind of come up with a new plan of the shot or kind of coordinate how much haze we have. So a lot of it was hiding. Like I think we did shoot more than where we showed the Yeti early on in case they decided they wanted to in the edit. But it was a fun challenge because it's like do you want to be like Jaws in the way you build up, you see the creature, and then the rest of the thing is the chase and stuff like that, which was part of the conversations we had. Like we weren't sure if we wanted like a big full on Yeti shot like earlier on in the film or to gradually show bits and pieces and then show more shadows and stuff like that. And that's also with the creature being a white figure in whites, in snow with haze and backlit. It can be hard to get it to feel right because if you completely kind of silhouette it, well, then it doesn't look like the Yeti anymore. Then it's
Right.
this black figure, and it. then we get into the whole Bigfoot lore and all that kind of stuff. And there's a different conversations, and some people can be, very particular about Bigfoot and Yeti and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted to make sure we had enough exposure to kind of be able to kind of feel the texture of the creature, but also show enough that we could pick the points when they during the edit of when we were going to show the Yeti in its glory, um, at the right moment.
Yeah, don't want to piss off the Bigfoot aficionados who are out there kind of critiquing the difference between the two. And I'm
No,
no
exactly.
expert, so you're not going to hear me like uh,
Uh,
have an opinion either way.
no, it's
Um,
funny. I have seen some people comment like on when they released the trailer for it. It's like, oh, the Yetis in the Himalayas. We've got Bigfoot over here, and it's just like, I mean, I don't know, man. I appreciate having shot films in Nepal. I've the director I work with over there has spoken about wanting to do a Yeti film one day, and it is a big part of their lore. And it's like, but I don't know, maybe this one came over the ice. Like we just don't quite know. But it's still I liked it that it was a Yeti. It was a good challenge.
no, of course, and I think again, like the look of it is um, it's really fun that we don't get a full view of it until in the actual end because and I think what helps to complement the desire to see is that there's so much like action that happens in between that. Like I think about the scene where and I'll forget the character's name. He's the one who has, half of his face is wearing a
Hmm.
mask, where he gets pulled through the window. And like
Mm.
there's just so much in there that's like it's almost funny to a point, but you're like, but it's grounded in this very real dread where she's kind of holding the intestine and it's just like you're like it almost feels like there's a joke in there, but it's like, do I laugh? Do I not laugh? So there's a very
Mm.
tongue-in-cheek element to the film, and was that the way it was on set as well? Is this kind of like very jovial and
Yeah,
almost joyous environment around the production?
I mean, yeah, without a doubt, especially for stuff like that. Like when you get that amount of blood and guts coming in the bag, you're like, "This is gonna be a fun day." And then you get, you rig up Link, that actor, when we rigged him up through the harness and trying to get through the window. But it took the scene that leads up to that was one of the most challenging in terms of pacing and shots and just how that whole scene played out. And we had to really block that in pre-production to get to the right moment to make sure we had given all the right beats until we got up to that point. So knowing we had gotten everything was kind of a really stressful moment. So we knew once we got to the window and had him rigged up to the harness to be pulled through the window, it was like, okay, now it's time for some fun, like now we can really sort of let loose and move on to the next part of the scene. Now the challenging coverage, performance beats are done. Like now let's rip him out, and it's like I think again it's doing things practically and doing harnesses and wires as well as like a big thing of like the big Yeti hand that comes through and having all that as well as all the guts. It's just such a fun way of filmmaking. Like the practical
Yeah.
filmmaking is just so great and so much fun, and we knew that's kind of and that's what we wanted to do. Like it's not this massive budget thing that's the most serious thing in the world. It's like it's a good creature feature and you want some practical effects like all the good ones did. And I think it's trying to sort of make that type of film, it was a lot of fun. So there was definitely some really good times on set during that, especially when there was a lot of blood and guts.
Yeah, hopefully none of the equipment got too soaked. But there's given that you filmed on a soundstage, I think one of the most fascinating things is that you're able to create this very. I mean, we don't know it's a soundstage, and I think that that's part of the the immersion that comes through good filmmaking. But what advice would you give to other cinematographers and DPs out there who don't have the ability, obviously shooting at a location outside presents its own challenges, but what would
Mm.
you advise others that are thinking about filming on a soundstage? How do they get that sense of scale without having a lot of real estate to use?
I think it's just the most important thing is I would say is like a combination of depth and contrast. Like you could like I said, like we didn't have a massive lighting kit, and sometimes we only had like a background scenic that we lit up in one area. It was too big that we couldn't move it to be our background always. So sometimes we'd be shooting it in a direction, and in that line we've got like six trees, and then past that was they're building another set back there, and it's just darkness. So it's like we know we can't shoot forever. So it's just we know that's why I was confident we could do it with a relatively small lighting package because we knew we would be shooting relatively wide open where we don't have a ton of depth of field. And it's just like if you place a little bit of a light in the distance that's hitting the last branch of the tree and that's slightly out of focus, then you can have the foreground um, kind of you set your exposure to that and just sort of know how much depth you want. So whether it's in the back of the studio or in the like on the actual set that we had, I just think it's creating enough shadow to hide what you're trying, but it's just sort of knowing yeah, I think knowing how much depth you have and how your exposure can affect that. So it's just, without getting too technical, yeah, it's just that combination of knowing your exposure and where you want to be and how much is that going to show. So I think, yeah, it's kind of a long-winded answer on advice I'd give, but I just think, yeah, it's just knowing your depth, knowing your, where you want to highlight, and it could be the easiest thing is like a little flashlight with its like not necessarily for this film, but I've done it before, that you just put on a C stand in the distance that was kind of just a glow, and then all of a sudden, well, there's a light that's could be miles away off in the distance, but you're just that little with taking the top off the flashlight is going to be enough of a glow that it sends like, oh, there's a town back there, or there's someone back there. So you can definitely do on a soundstage scaled or wherever it's scaled, as long as you kind of have the right um, a bit of an idea of how much darkness you're able to play with. You know?
I think that's why that was so interested in the partnership with you and the lighting crew because there is such a use of like it's almost like you're not using light as much as you're using the darkness and then
Mm-hmm.
using light to complement so that you get enough visibility rather than ensuring that you have enough light so everyone sees. It's almost like part of the film is to not be able to see everything and it kind of leans into the fact that we don't fully know what the Yeti looks like. We don't fully understand where we are, and it
Mm-hmm.
adds to the mystery and the lure. And I think more broadly, what are some of the things that what are some of the hardest lessons you've learned kind of cutting your teeth on the short film circuit and kind of independent films, then now moving up more into like bigger features and obviously creature features having a lot more involved with them. But what are some of the hardest lessons you've had to learn going, starting from truly DIY to now working with bigger crews and shooting longer features?
Oh boy, so many. um, I think the hardest is just like you've really got to learn how to pick your battles. Like I did. I remember years ago I did a short film and we had one scene that we're out in the woods of Louisiana and we were going to be shooting on I can't remember what camera it was, but it was really good low light sensitivity. And it wasn't the main camera we were using for the whole shoot because that wasn't as good in just low lights. So this plan of just like for this one scene, we'll just get down and dirty and just put a few lights on trees in the background, and that'll give us enough for this scene. But then that camera, because we had firelight in it as well, and there's something about the sensor went a bit crazy, so we had to bring out. I think this was back on like the Red Dragon days, and so we brought out the main camera, and it just wasn't it. We just didn't have the time to light the whole forest and stuff like that as much as I'd wanted to give us as much depth. And the gaffer was like, "Oh, give me 20 minutes. I can run around and do this, this, and this." And it's just like I looked at the shot and looked at what we were kind of seeing, and it's like let's just put a panel on the ground, just like illuminating that tree, just to give us a little faint bit of something. Because I knew that if we had have taken another 30 minutes, 45 minutes to light it how we originally planned, um, that's going to cut into your day, obviously. And I knew that day the ending scene of the whole film was to take place right as at sunrise, and it's like so your whole day is based around that, and you've got to work backwards. And it's like once you start cutting into your day, 30 minutes here, 45 minutes here, like everything else is going to be rushed, and it's just like pick your battles. Like what's getting this final scene of the film in the perfect light is more important than this small scene that we had in the woods. So let's just, pick your battles. How are we going to do this? How can we do this that tells the story that feels in the same world and in the same um, vibe that's not going to feel like a different movie and move on because it's like as much as we all would love all the time in the world, even as budgets get bigger and films get bigger, it's like you're always racing the sun, you're always racing. So you've just really got to pick your battles. It's just like how can we tell this story efficiently and how can we move fast. And it's like if you're able to move fast and have things not be completely perfect in one scene, but that buys you more time in the next scene, then and that next scene's more crucial to the story, then it's like, well, let's just do what we kind of do to tell the story in this one, and focus our energy on the next scene. I think so. It's learning how to pick your battles, which comes with experience, but it's just
Right.
um it's really important part of this job because it's just you always think it's coming on when you get a more bigger budget film, and then the next film comes, you got a bigger budget, and then you look at the schedule and you're like, these days look pretty similar, and this is we're still doing a lot of pages per day and a lot of setups and all location moves. So it's like it's just something that if you learn how to kind of manage time and pick your battles earlier on, the better you'll be for it.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of the adage, perfect is the enemy of great, and that if we
Hmm.
continue aspiring towards getting something just the exact way we want it, you don't want to be the reason why a day gets compromised for one, because that just kind of puts everyone in a bad mood. But also,
Exactly.
you there is this kind of idea of like, how do we be okay with what we've, be confident what we have and go forward
Hmm.
with it. So I think that's a lesson that everyone could probably take something away from in terms and apply to whether they're behind the camera, whether they're in front of it.
Hmm.
Just how do we kind of work with compromise? And my last question
Yeah.
for you, Joel, is just a bit of a fun one, but if you
Hmm.
were asked to program a double feature and they're going to show the Yeti and they're saying, "Hey, Joel, we want you to pick the second film that goes along with it," what do you think would make a really fun companion piece?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I mean, I would say The Thing, but then it's just like that movie's just so. I mean, like the Yeti's really fun, but it's like The Thing's just like it's such a masterpiece. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably would have to just say The Thing because it's like let's bring back, or I would even go back to some movies. I mean, might be too much of a wild card change of pace, but like some of the films when I was really young, when you discover is like some early Peter Jackson films, like he did like Brain Dead,
Yeah,
which is a very different movie, but it's like all the practical creatures and stuff they use in that movie. Like I remember watching that movie as a kid, being like, "What is this? Like this is the wildest thing I've ever seen," but it's just so much fun, and it showed like, look at Peter Jackson, like he was
right.
just the most creative filmmaker that just had these wild ideas. So it's like, yeah, maybe something like Brain Dead or something like let's go back to look at these lower budget wild creature features and let's just have fun at the movies and let's do some fun stuff, you know?
Oh, as a huge fan of Brain Dead and Dead Alive when they ever here in the U.S., it
Yeah.
is especially seeing it at such a young age. You are really like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that's what that
No.
looks like. And then of
Hmm.
course you get lines like kicking ass for the Lord, and you're like, this movie has it all. Like, how could I?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be so much fun. And I think, even like keeping it in the creature feature realm with something like
Mm.
Grizzly,
Mm.
or Progeny. These are all fun movies
Mm.
that kind of take that idea of creature features and bring them into the, you know, dabble in the exploitation side, but really are about telling really fun creature focused stories. So, um,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Joel, this has been a ton of fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the film. And I want to remind everyone watching this that The Yeti will be released in theaters on April 4th, following a VOD release on April 10th. And I believe, if memory serves, they're having a premiere at the Beyond Fest in Chicago on the
Hmm.
3rd.
Yes.
So excited. If you are attending Chicago Beyond Fest, go see this in the theater. This is one of those movies that you just need to see with other people so you can get the crowd reactions because it makes it so much more of the fun. But Joel, looking forward to whatever work you're working on next, and I hope we can chat
Appreciate
again
it.
soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.